This is Chapter 6, Physical Design. As you know, we started in Chapter 4 of this textbook with logical design. That's where we created ERDs, things like that, and also we continued that with the normalization process in Chapter 5. So now we have a good database design. Physical design means we're actually going to create it physically in a relational database system. So from Chapter 4 and 5, we're going to take that logical design, or our ERD, and we're going to create it in a physical database. It says here we may have to adapt the logical design to fit the features and functions of the database management system that we choose, and that's fine. But for the most part, when you're designing the database, you pretty much know the limitations and features of the chosen DBMS. When they say chosen DBMS, they're talking about one of the relational database management systems that are in effect today, such as Oracle or IBM's DB2, SQL Server, Access, things like that. It says many times you won't have a choice of which system you're going to create this database in, and that's true for most of the time, I would say. You just simply put it on the one that your business already has. Most businesses of any size has a relational database system already. So most likely you would be implementing it there. Once in a while you'll choose your own. And there's some things to consider here. You want it to be compatible with the existing hardware that you have and software. And just you look over the features and everything of each particular database. They're all pretty much the same, except for the size. Large, real big company type systems, you'd be limited to certain ones, or if you're just going to be on a real small basis, you would get more toward the personal type DBMSs. You could also take into account if you have expertise, if your IT people have expertise in a certain one already. Of course, price and licensing takes always is a consideration for most companies. And the reliability and support, you want to look into all those different factors when choosing a DBMS. The nice thing about this chapter, or one of the nice things, is that it does show us some screens in a different database system than what we've been using. Of course, we've been using Access. This shows some of the screens in SQL Server, and you can see a lot of the things, they might look a little different, but we've seen very similar things in Access already. For instance, here's a slide that shows creating a new database in SQL Server. We have these options in Access too. They just look a little different on the screens. New database dialog box, you'd put your database name in there and just keep going. This is like a little wizard type thing to help you create a database. Okay, once you have your database created, at the beginning you are going to be creating tables. You need tables before you can do pretty much anything else. We know that tables are made up of columns and rows. Columns is another word for fields. And each field or column has a data type. And that simply determines what kind of value can be stored in this field. There's broad categories here. Numeric data types, of course, can store numbers. Character data types, or what Access calls text, can store numbers and characters and other special characters. The last bullet here says there are some ANSI, meaning some standard data types, but for the most part, DBMSs, each one has their own variation of data types. It's kind of strange. A lot of them are a lot of database systems use different names, but they mean the same thing. I'll try to talk a little bit about that with Access. Here's some of the numeric data types in SQL Server. You'll notice I don't think we have any of these, maybe decimal, in Access. One thing to remember with numeric data types is you're either dealing with numbers that have no decimal points, which are usually referred to as integers, or you're referring to numeric values that have a decimal place. So real, float, decimal, those are the ones that have numeric or decimal points. A lot of systems have special data types, numeric data types for currency. SQL Server calls it money, small money. You can see it just depends on the size, how big of a value you can store. Same with integers. These are numbers with no decimal points. And again, there's 4 of them here, actually 5, because of the different the amount of bytes that it takes up in memory. And then that determines how big of a value you can store in those fields. Of course, you want to always declare it as small as possible, but still big enough to hold the largest value that you're going to be putting into that field. So it takes a little investigation to discover and determine which numeric data type you want for a field. Most systems also have date-time data types. Access calls it date time, and then down in the properties for that field is where you further develop what data type, or if it's a date or a time or both. SQL Server has different data types, whether it's a date or a time. You can see them there. The other broad category of data types is character, or string data, sometimes it's called, or text data. They all mean the same thing. You're going to store alphanumeric data, maybe some special characters. Looks like SQL Server has text also. Variable character, a lot of different data types for characters and text. The key for you at this point is just to realize that different database management systems have different names for their data types. And a lot of times they are equivalent of other names in other database systems. Unicode, that's an extended character set because some languages have a lot more than just the 26 characters in their alphabet, such as Russian or Japanese, Chinese, languages like that. So there's this extended character set if your system is going to be used outside, say, the US. And here's some other miscellaneous data types that SQL Server has. And you probably recognize maybe some similar ones that we had in Access. I'll continue with the next video starting on slide 13.